A child disappears without leaving a trace in a place considered safe. Abduction, negligence, or a truth so disturbing that no one dares to accept it? Today we reveal what probably happened to Madeleine McCann. Brace yourself. The answer might change everything you believe you know. Are you also fascinated by mysteries that defy logic? Stories so dark that few have the courage to uncover them? Then subscribe to the channel now and activate the notification bell. Each click is a step toward unraveling together the secrets the world tries to hide. 17 years have passed, millions have been spent, suspects have come and gone, and yet the truth remains out of reach. Or has it always been right in front of us, waiting to be seen? Today we piece together a dark puzzle that may finally reveal what happened that night. To understand this, we need to look beyond the headlines and examine the details that have emerged over the years. You who are already familiar with the story know that various theories have come and gone, but today the focus is on what truly makes sense. Close your eyes and visualize Praia da Luz, an idyllic paradise where the sound of the waves lulls peaceful nights. Families relax, children sleep safely. That night, while the McCanns dined just meters away, what seemed like a perfect refuge became the stage for an unimaginable nightmare. But when Kate returned to check on the children at 10 p.m., the family's life changed forever. Madeleine was no longer there, but the silence of that night gave way to a whirlwind of disturbing theories. A trafficking network, a crime of opportunity, or something even more unthinkable, something within the family itself? Each hypothesis seemed more bewildering than the last. These are questions that have haunted this case for years, but no theory has brought concrete evidence to complete the puzzle. Today, one of the most discussed hypotheses is that Madeleine may have been a victim of a local sexual predator. This line of thought gained strength when Christian Bruckner, a criminal with a history of child abuse, was identified as a suspect. He was in the Algarve region at the time of the disappearance and was associated with similar crimes. However, he was recently acquitted of unrelated sexual crime charges, and no concrete evidence directly linked Bruckner to Madeleine's disappearance. This brings us back to what we know. If it wasn't Bruckner, who was? One theory that still intrigues many is the possibility that Madeleine was kidnapped for illegal adoption. At the time, witnesses reported suspicious individuals observing children at the resort, and there are records of attempted kidnappings in nearby areas. Could Madeleine have been taken as part of a premeditated plan? Perhaps. But again, evidence is lacking. Another possibility paints an even darker scenario. An intruder lurking, planning to steal, but surprised by a waking and vulnerable. An irreversible choice was made. This line of reasoning was also investigated, but never found support in concrete evidence. Now let's get to the most disturbing point. Could the answer have always been right before our eyes, but we were unable to accept it? Some experts suggest that the disappearance may have been the result of a tragic set of circumstances. Failures in the resort security, a window of opportunity created by the family's routine, and perhaps a criminal who knew the location very well and knew the exact moment to act. Over these 17 years, we've learned that in such cases, the truth is rarely simple. But one thing is certain, Madeleine was a victim of something that should never have happened. And while theories come and go, time keeps running. Are we really closer to an answer? Or is this mystery destined to be one that haunts us forever? A grim reminder that not all stories have clear endings? In the very first days after Madeleine's disappearance, some doubts began to arise. Initially, the idea that the girl had been kidnapped seemed logical, but a closer look caused details to start drawing attention. The version presented by the parents and authorities did not completely align with what was found at the location and with subsequent reports. For example, one point that always raised questions was the children's bedroom window. Kate McCann stated that she found it open, with the blinds raised, something she and Jerry had not done. This raised the hypothesis that someone used the window as an entry or exit point. However, Portuguese authorities examined the window and found no signs of forced entry. If the window wasn't forced, how did someone enter or leave with Madeleine without being noticed? Another important detail involves the behavior of Jane Tanner, the couple's friend. That night, around 9:15 p.m., she said she saw a man carrying a child wrapped in a blanket. At first, this report seemed like a key point in the investigation. However, later, the police themselves began to question the accuracy of her statement. The described scene was not confirmed by any other witness, including Jerry McCann, who was in the same area at the time and saw nothing suspicious. This raises another question. Was Jane Tanner's sighting just a coincidence or something more? And there's more. When Matthew Oldfield, another friend of the group, went to to check on the children at 9:30 p.m. He reported that everything seemed in order. But there's a curious detail here. He didn't fully enter the room, just glanced inside. If Madeleine was no longer there at that moment, Matthew might have simply not noticed. This creates a critical 30-minute window between the last time Jerry saw Madeleine and the moment Kate discovered she had disappeared. A gap that remains full of holes and doubts to this day. And speaking of inconsistencies, the sniffer dogs that participated in the investigation raised even more questions. 2 dogs were used, one trained to detect human blood and another for cadaveric odor. Both indicated signs in the McCann's apartment and later in a car rented by the family weeks after the disappearance. This led to the theory that Madeleine might have died in the apartment and that her parents staged a kidnapping. However, the samples collected were analyzed in a laboratory and deemed inconclusive. And here arises another point. Why would the dogs react that way if there was nothing relevant there? Another lingering doubt is the lack of witnesses or visual records of Madeleine being taken. Even if the window was used, the apartment was in a relatively busy area of the resort. How could someone take a child from there without drawing attention? Moreover, no one reported hearing screams or strange noises, which would be expected in such a situation. Kate McCann's own reaction raised suspicions. When she realized Madeleine wasn't in the room, instead of shouting for help right there, she ran to the restaurant where the group was dining. Some people questioned this action, arguing that it would make more sense to start the search immediately around the apartment or nearby areas. This behavior was used as a basis for accusations against Kate, but it can also be explained by the state of shock she was likely in. And of course, there's the issue of time. The Portuguese police did not secure the disappearance scene immediately, which may have compromised crucial evidence. Tourists and resort staff entered and left the apartment that night, which may have erased or contaminated possible clues. This initial mistake further complicated the investigators' work and contributed to the various conflicting versions that emerged. Finally, there are reports about the friends' routine that week. Everyone was dining together at the same restaurant during holiday evenings, while the children stayed alone. Could someone observing the group have noticed this pattern and planned the kidnapping based on it? Those first days were full of confusion and contradictory information. Even now, years later, many of these questions remain unanswered. Now that we've raised the contradictions and inconsistencies, it's time to take a closer look at the clues and theories that have emerged over the years. These hypotheses attempt to explain what might have happened to Madeleine that night, but as you will realize, none of them are simple. One of the first theories, and perhaps the most controversial, involves the parents themselves. This hypothesis gained strength after sniffer dogs indicated traces of blood and cadaveric odor in the McCann's apartment and in a car they rented weeks after the disappearance. This led investigators to consider the possibility that Madeleine might have died accidentally, and the parents, to avoid consequences, staged a kidnapping. This theory is partly based on the allegation that Kate and Jerry might have given sedatives to their children to keep them asleep during the night, something they have always denied. Moreover, forensic tests conducted on the samples found were considered inconclusive, and no concrete evidence linked the McCanns to this line of reasoning. Still, the lack of clear answers and some questionable actions by the parents, such as Kate's refusal to answer certain questions during an interrogation, continue to fuel speculation. But without evidence, it's impossible to assign any responsibility to the couple. Another widely discussed hypothesis is that Madeleine was kidnapped by a child trafficking network. This idea began to gain strength when witnesses reported seeing suspicious people near the resort in the days leading up to the disappearance. Among them were 2 men who were reportedly seen observing apartments and approaching tourists with donation requests for a fake charity. Some theories suggest that these individuals could have been scouting targets for a larger organization. Praia da Luz, despite being a peaceful tourist area, is not far from routes that could be used to transport a child out of Portugal quickly. This hypothesis is also reinforced by reports that children of Madeleine's age were frequently trafficked for illegal adoption or other purposes. Still, the police never managed to identify these individuals or establish a direct connection to the case. Witnesses never reported seeing Madeleine being taken by strangers that night, making this theory another possibility without concrete evidence. A third point of discussion involves the hypothesis of an opportunistic crime. In this scenario, someone who knew the resort well or was just passing through the area might have entered the apartment without a clear plan, perhaps intending to steal. Upon finding Madeleine awake, this person might have acted on impulse and decided to take her to avoid being identified. This line of reasoning is also supported by some previous cases in the region. Before Madeleine's disappearance, there were reports of intruders entering tourist apartments and even abuses occurring within these properties. The police investigated several of these incidents but never found a direct link to the McCann case. Christian Bruckner, who was pointed out as the main suspect many years later, is frequently mentioned in this context. He had a history history of sexual crimes and breaking into properties in the Algarve area. Cell phone records show that he was in Praia da Luz on the night of the disappearance. However, despite his suspicious connection to the area and his disturbing history, German authorities found no concrete evidence to formally charge him. Recently, he was acquitted of accusations in other unrelated cases. Finally, there's a less discussed but still intriguing theory: the possibility that Madeleine left the apartment alone and something happened to her outside. Although it seems unlikely, it's a possibility that cannot be completely ruled out. On the night of the disappearance, the blinds and window were open, and some believe that Madeleine might have woken up and tried to go after her parents. But if that happened, no one reported seeing a child alone on the streets that night, and what happened afterward remains a mystery. These theories lead us to a common point. They all present possibilities, but none offer definitive answers. Each has its own gaps, contradictions, and leaves more questions than answers. Still, analyzing them is essential to try to understand what might have occurred during that time interval between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. when everything changed. Now, with these clues and possibilities in mind, we continue our search for what makes the most sense. After all, after so many years, are the answers closest about Madeleine McCann's disappearance? It's time to look at a revelation that changed how the case is interpreted. For years, it seemed that all possibilities had been exhausted. But in 2020, an overlooked detail came to light: cell phone records connecting Christian Bruckner to Praia da Luz on the night of the disappearance. Although he was officially acquitted of other, more recent charges, we cannot ignore what was discovered at that time. Phone records show that Bruckner received a 30-minute call between 7:32 p.m. and 8:02 p.m. from a number located in the same area as the McCann's apartment. To this day, this call remains shrouded in mystery. Who was on the other end of the line? What did they talk about? The fact that he was so close to the location that night is something that cannot simply be ignored. Additionally, there is the report that Bruckner owned a van, which he used both as a means of transportation and as an improvised home. This van was seen in the outskirts of Praia da Luz during the disappearance period. Years later, in searches conducted in Germany, the police found evidence linking Bruckner to other crimes, including hidden cameras, children's clothes, and child pornography material. Although these findings are not direct proof of involvement in Madeleine's case, they reinforce the image of a meticulous criminal capable of committing heinous acts. But there's an even more disturbing detail. A witness reported in 2008 that Bruckner made an indirect confession while talking with a friend. According to the account, he mentioned Madeleine's disappearance, saying something like, "She didn't scream." This vague statement raised a new line of questioning. If Bruckner wasn't involved, how could he make such a statement? This declaration, combined with his location on the night of the crime and his history, reignited suspicions against him. Another point that puts Bruckner in the spotlight is the fact that he transferred ownership of a car, a Jaguar, the day after the disappearance. This transfer, done hastily, caught the investigators' attention. What was he trying to hide? Or was it just a coincidence? Each of these details individually might not be conclusive, but together they create a picture that is hard to ignore. Now let's return to that mysterious call on the night of May 3rd, 2007. It lasted half an hour and was made to a public phone in the area. This is a detail that went unnoticed during the initial investigation, but later proved to be crucial. Who would call a public phone at that hour in a location so close to the McCann's apartment? It's a question that still has no answer, but it points to the possibility that Madeleine's disappearance was planned in advance. More recently, investigations revealed another curious fact. Bruckner had connections with two properties in the Algarve region, both located a few kilometers from Praia da Luz. One of them, situated near a reservoir, was searched in 2023 after an informant said they believed Madeleine might be buried there. The searches found nothing, but the fact that Bruckner frequented this location and called it "my little paradise" left investigators intrigued. However, even with these discoveries, there is a lack of direct evidence to incriminate him. There is no DNA, eyewitnesses, or any concrete proof connecting him directly to Madeleine. This gap in the evidence is what makes the case so frustrating, even after so many years. While Bruckner remains a significant suspect, German authorities have made it clear that he will only be charged if new evidence emerges. For now, he is serving time for other crimes and is set to be released in 2025. This new perspective, though shocking, does not provide definitive answers, but opens the door for greater reflection. Are we dealing with a criminal who managed to erase all traces of his act, or is the true responsible party family still at large, far from any suspicion. These revelations have reignited interest in the case, but also remind us that even with advanced technology and international investigations, some answers may never be found. Madeleine's disappearance remains an enigma, and what happened that night still defies our understanding. The Madeleine McCann case is a puzzle that continues to challenge the logic and patience of all of us. During this video, we reviewed the clues, deconstructed the contradictions, and brought to light theories that, although disturbing, help us better understand what might have happened that May night in 2007, and what probably happened to Madeleine McCann. The analysis of the most recent evidence suggests that Madeleine may have been the victim of a premeditated crime. An individual familiar with the resort and the McCann's habits could have observed the family's routine and planned the appearance visits. Was the perfect opportunity for someone to enter the apartment and take Madeleine without being noticed. Mystery hunters, this case shows us that even after 17 years, we still have unanswered questions. Will the truth ever come to light? Is the true responsible party living freely, far from any suspicion? Or are we dealing with such a well-executed crime that the solution may never appear? If you've watched until here, comment. I am a mystery hunter and I don't give up on the truth. So I know you watched the video until the end. I'd also love to hear your opinion. What do you think happened to Madeleine McCann? Leave your ideas in the comments, because together we can continue seeking these answers. And if you have an intriguing case or a dark mystery you'd like to see on the channel, leave your suggestion below. I, Damien, am always on the lookout for stories that challenge our understanding and stir our emotions. Don't forget, subscribe now and help uncover the darkest secrets of the human mind. This helps us continue bringing the most impactful mysteries to you. And if you're still in doubt about this case or want to delve into a mystery as disturbing as this one, don't leave without clicking on the next video. There, you'll find another enigma that will surely satisfy your craving for stories that defy reason. Stay tuned, because not every monster hides in the shadows. And remember, evil might be closer than you think. Until the next investigation.